Welcome to the Workspace podcast, a place to take up space, a space for you to settle in, sit back, relax, and focus a little bit on health, wellness, faith, family, and this crazy thing called life.
This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Welcome to the Workspace podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking with Hope and Healing's clinical director, Anastasia Wynn, about the importance of putting some healthy boundaries when you are working in a fully telework capacity.
Hey listeners, quick intermission with one of our providers at Hope and Healing, Kristen Wilson, LCSW-C, who has started offering a new program at Hope and Healing for our couples called Prepare and Enrich. So Kristen, could you give us a little more information about that program?
Prepare and Enrich is a service that we'll be offering to premarital couples. It is a strength-based program that utilizes assessment portion and then subsequent sessions to look at that assessment and discuss what are your strengths, what are the areas of growth, what are conversations that you'd like to have as you are leading up to and preparing for marriage. One of the nice things about Prepare and Enrich is that it covers not only a wide variety of areas, but it can be utilized with couples that are in different stages of life as well. So maybe this is your first marriage. Maybe it is a blending of families that come into play when you are preparing for this. So the idea is that we can support you in that process and support you in having conversations with your partner and planning ahead for success.
And if someone is interested in seeking out this service for themselves and their partner, how could they go about inquiring or scheduling an appointment?
Contact us at Hope and Healing. You can go to the website and send us your information and we'll get back with you, or you can give us a call and we'll get you scheduled. There's more than one option when it comes to utilizing this program. This is a set group of sessions. So you will either be choosing to engage in 4 sessions or 8 sessions, depending on what your needs are, what your interests are, and what works for you. The assessment is part of both of those, the skill building, the recognizing our growth areas and working on those are included in both of those sets. So you will get that experience, but just the timing of it might look different depending on your needs.
Yes, so you can give us a call at 301-690-8404, extension 0. If you get the voicemail, make sure that you leave us one so that we can give you a call back within 24 hours. You can also visit our website, like Kristen mentioned, at hopehealingtherapy.com.
And welcome to the Workspace podcast. I am excited today to welcome Anastasia Wynn, who is our clinical director. So glad to have you today, Anastasia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Anastasia is coming to us live from Florida as she has taken a step in a different direction here at Hope and Healing. So do you want to tell us, tell our listeners kind of who you are and what you do, and maybe how you found yourself working in this telework capacity?
Sure. As Jen said, my name is Anastasia Wynn. I'm the clinical director at Hope and Healing. I have been with Hope and Healing since 2019, and in 2021, I came on full-time as the clinical director, and I stayed in a full-time in-person capacity for the first nearly 2 years that I was the clinical director at the practice. However, in May of this year, so about 7 months ago, I transitioned to a fully telework capacity, and I see clients virtually as we move to Florida. My husband is active duty, and so we had a PCS, and here we are. So now I work remotely full-time, but still work for the Maryland practice.
Yeah, and you and I both know, Anastasia, that we spent a lot of time talking about, will this work? How will this work? And kind of our internal preparations for you being a fully remote employee. How did you yourself prepare for this transition from being in person with some telehealth and then transitioning fully to a telework position?
So it's interesting because it felt a lot like the early days of COVID when I started, because that was the last time that I was in a fully remote capacity, was when we were all in lockdown. However, it wasn't, again, quite as restrictive as it was before. But for the most part, the biggest piece that I looked at was having a private space, setting up a space that was comfortable, and having the ability to make sure that I had good Wi-Fi. So those were the three things that I looked at from the start. I made sure that I had my sound machine. I made sure that my Wi-Fi was set up. If before our furniture was delivered, if you were in sessions with me, you saw me sitting in a camp chair. I was still in this room. It just was very white and empty. But that was really the biggest prep to get started, was just making sure that I had a secure private space, making sure that I had good Wi-Fi, and making sure that I was ready to kind of dive into that fully virtual world.
Yeah, so what you've just talked about is the logistical preparations, and I think what we're going to jump into now is more of the some of the logistics, but also just some of the internal barriers, maybe external boundaries that we need to put into place. So, over the course of the next two episodes, we're going to be talking about, first of all, some difficulties, some barriers, and some don'ts in terms of if you are going into a telework capacity or if you're struggling with a telework position. And then in our second episode, immediately following this one, we're going to really look at some important tricks and tips and the must do's in order to maintain healthy boundaries within teleworking. So, can we start with some of the difficulties or the barriers that you found, or maybe others shared with you in the course of you preparing for this telework position?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I didn't realize until I sat back and thought about it just how many people that are in my immediate circle that work fully remotely, whether they are working for the government, they're working in like a private industry, they're working in higher ed. I mean, and then everything in between. And so it's interesting because everyone's perspective is different and everyone has their pieces of advice. I would say for me, the most difficult barrier is I am a people person. I like people. I like talking to people. I like seeing people. And going from a capacity where I was in person seeing people every day, as well as my team every day, to going to a position where I'm walking down the hallway to get to my office and seeing people remotely, I think that was one of the most difficult pieces for me because that doesn't feel like I'm getting that interaction. And so I had to be really intentional with finding time and social opportunities outside of that. And that's a very nerve-wracking experience as an adult, right? Like I think we take for granted the friendships and the relationships that we've built. And so going into a position where I don't know anyone in a completely new state, and then I still have my tie, but you don't have that social option, it's it's challenging.
Well, and here at Hope and Healing, we have also created a really cool family close knit environment. So I can imagine when we have our meetings and some are on the screen and some are in the office, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So I'm sure that that feels different for you as well in terms of the way that you're interacting with the staff.
Absolutely. I mean, I am very much, I love to be in the thick of it, right? Like if something's going on, I want to be there. I want to be supporting. I want to be, if everyone's frustrated, I'm going to be frustrated. If everyone's happy, I'm going to be happy, right? And so it's hard to go to a situation where it's a physical barrier. And so I think that it's been really helpful in some ways because it's really taught me how to be active and intentional with those social opportunities. But also, I've had to get creative with supervising staff. I mean, because so much of our work in therapy world is reading body language, and in virtual world, we get you from the chest up. And so it works the same when I'm with staff, right? Like it's so easy to see when they sit down on the couch, like how are we feeling? What's going on? But when I only get from there up, I have to be much more intentional. So I think that it's definitely been a learning curve, but it's been good. It's a great option, especially when you're in a family where you're going to have to move and transition and things are going to change. So it allows that continuity as well.
How would you describe focusing? How do you, has that been a barrier for you, or have others shared with you that it's a barrier in terms of being at home yet
Mhm.
having home demands and work demands all within the same physical space?
Yeah, so I'll say that in the first few months, my office was set up a little bit differently. You guys couldn't see it on the screen, but it was a much longer desk and we had two computers. And so when I wasn't working, my husband would share the space with me, which was fine, except for the fact that I learned that we both concentrate very differently. He is going to listen to music. He is going to do all of these things. And I am a very much a silent person. I don't want music. I don't want interruption. And so that was challenging. We ultimately split our spaces. So now I have my own office and he has his own space because we do work so differently. And when I'm in a session, nobody else can be in here, minus my dog. So they always pop in. But his work is so different than mine. He can have people in and out. That's not a big deal. So that was a little bit of a logistical barrier. But I think the other piece of it is I think we take for granted our decompression time on our way into the office and our way out of the office. Whereas here, I eat breakfast and then I come to work, right? There's no separation. And at the end of the day, sometimes our days are heavy and having to then just open the door and be on is really hard. And so I had to figure out a way to give myself that decompression time without those drives. So now at the end of the day, I walk to my mailbox, which is like half a mile down the road. So I walk to my mailbox and I walk back, and that's my decompression time. Sometimes I listen to a podcast, sometimes I listen to music, sometimes I walk in silence. It just depends on the day. But that separation has been huge. I mean, the other pieces is you're right. Like if your house is messy, if you have laundry in, if it's really nice outside, it's so hard to sit in a room with without being able to open the windows and things like that. So those are challenging.
Well, and we have the benefit also of doing walk and talk here at the offices, and that is something that I know that you previously enjoyed with your clients, and that makes it a little bit different. Although I remember during COVID that we got pretty creative with doing some walk and talk to encourage our clients to get out and get moving as well. So I'm sure that you're figuring those out. You know, for me as your supervisor, this next piece of it is not at all a concern to me, but for some it may be, and that is there's there's a change in the oversight
Mhm.
with working remotely. I mean, when you were here in the office, if it was a day where there wasn't a lot of clients or not a lot of quote things to do, then, you know, you and I could just chat and you could pick up extra work and we could, do things that needed to get done. But when you're there and I'm here, it's a little bit different. So how do you manage the lack of oversight, or how might you consider sharing for other people how to manage that? Because like I said, for us that's not a problem, but for others it may be.
Absolutely. And in talking with some of my friends, that is a big piece is the oversight. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. But I think that what I've found is having that weekly meeting where you and I check in, I know what I need to add to my list. The other piece is I'm very organized and I set high expectations of myself. So I keep a running list of things that I need to get done. And if I have downtime and I complete my like normal weekly tasks, I have a list of things always on the back burner that I can do. And so for me, that's been helpful because then if I do have a week where I have a few extra cancellations or something comes up or I just get my work done faster, then I have that as something to fall back on. But I know that in terms of if you have kids at home, if you have spouses or you have partners or you have people who are here, it can be challenging because if your door is open and you're accessible, it's the same as when you're in the office if someone's going to pop in and chat with you. So I think that that's for me been helpful, but also giving myself those opportunities for a movement break. If I build that in and I know, okay, after 2 or 3 sessions, I need to do a loop and walk for 10 minutes. Or if I need to just walk in the backyard and sit outside for 5 minutes, I make it a point to change my scenery because if I sit here for 8 hours in a row without moving, I finish and I feel like I feel gross. Like I just feel like I haven't moved, haven't done anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that knowing that I have those little breaks structured in help me with productivity because I'm like, okay, I just have to get through to this and then I can do some moving.
Yeah. You've been sprinkling in some really cool, friends and colleagues that they've found. And I'm sure it's different for, a government employee or a private industry person or a higher education. you within the mental health field. So I'm sure that there's different things that need to or don't need to or are not able to happen based on the kind of work from home position you have. What are some of the don'ts, the things that you must not do or that you would recommend not doing when you're in this telework capacity?
Yeah. So I think the biggest one is the fact that when you don't have that separation between home and work, right? If you work from home, the struggle is that you have these moments where you feel like you have to be accessible at all times of the day, right? So just because I log off at 5 o'clock Eastern time, I don't have to be accessible later in the day, right? If I start work at 7:30 Central time, then I know, okay, that's when I'm going to start checking my email and I'm going to be accessible. So I think one of the biggest don'ts is like you don't want to stop that work-life balance. Like just because you work from home doesn't mean that you have to be accessible at all times. It doesn't mean that, oh, I'll just grab my laptop and I can do a little extra work in the evening because I have the time, right? You have to have that separation.
I
Eating is,
think
oh, sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to interrupt you. I think that, you mentioned earlier that it was reminiscent of early COVID when you first made this transition. And I remember talking to clients a lot about how they were much more productive when they went to a telework capacity during the early parts of the lockdown. But they also found that they were working much, much longer hours because they could, rather than, getting in at a certain time and leaving at a certain time, they just worked. And that certainly can cause a significant drain and impact that work-life balance. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other piece is in terms of movement, right? If you're working from home and you're in a more sedentary environment, you're going to be seated, not going to be moving nearly as much, but you're also right by your kitchen. So it's really easy to think like, oh, I want a snack. Okay, well, do you really want a snack or are you bored or what are you looking for? So those grazing opportunities. And so in talking with some friends, like snacking because you're able to, right? It's much different when you're in the office because your food is packed, you have what you brought. And for the most part, that's all you're going to eat throughout the day, unless like you go for a snack at the office or something like that. But I think that that's another don't, right? Because we want to fuel our body for what we need, but we don't want to eat because we're bored or eat because we're missing that social connection or eat for an emotional reason. You want to eat when you're hungry and not necessarily for those emotional sides. So I think that that's another big don't to look at.
Yeah, really taking care of yourself is still
Mhm.
vitally important. We spend a lot of time talking to our clients about the importance of that work-life balance and putting self-care as a priority. And some of the folks that are listening to this podcast may be other mental health providers that do a similar job. And sometimes we don't take our own advice, and we
Mhm.
have to be reminded of those things. Hopefully, some of the people that are listening are working in different fields and have different structures in terms of what their responsibilities are. And they need to hear that message too, right? That you really have to take care of yourself.
Mhm.
How might there be a boundary that needs to be put in place for not feeling well or being sick? What do you say with that?
I think that the difference with this is when you're in a therapy role, if we are taking care of ourselves, it's really hard to be present and active for our clients. And so I think that in the therapy setting, if you're the way that I've tried to think about it is if I was in the office, would I call out? If I was in the office, would I take the day? And if that's the case, then that's a day that I need to not be working. I'll be honest, if it's a day that I have mostly administrative stuff or I'm just working with other clinicians, is it something that I can push through? Then I may, because I know that I'm not at risk of making them sick. But the biggest thing is in this setting, like if I'm meeting with a client and I'm not 100%, that's not fair to them. And so yeah, I could push through, I could make it work, but we look at if you were in the office, how would you handle that? Now, if it's like just a stuffy nose or allergies, like moving to a new place, like it's brutal. If it's just something along those lines and I know like my nose is stuffy, but like I'm fine, that's a very different situation. But if you have a fever, if you're just like struggling to keep your eyes open, that's not helpful for anyone. And I think that speaking with friends that are in other industries, I think that that's a little bit different because if you're pushing paper, if you're running numbers, if you can just kind of go through the motions, I think that people are more likely to just push through, as opposed to taking that sick day because they're not in the office and nobody's going to see that. And they want to save their days for other things. So, I mean, that's not really taking care of yourself. You're going to be sick longer than you would be if you just took the time to rest. But I understand the want to push through because I never want to disappoint my clients. But if I'm not taking care of myself, then I can't take care of them or model for them what it looks like to do that. Because sometimes we have people who they are working so hard to take care of everyone around them, but if they don't even see the person who's talking to them about that, about how to do that, if they don't see them do it, they don't necessarily have a model to be able to say, okay, I can do that too.
Yeah, because we have to take care of ourselves in order to be the best that we can be. Whether
Yeah.
you're a mental health professional working through telehealth or, someone who is working on spreadsheets and numbers and data and analytics all day,
Yeah.
we cannot do our best work if we're not feeling well. And so often I think there is a push for people to just keep working because they can do it from home. They can do it from bed if they have to. They can do it from their couch if they need to. And ultimately, they're just not resting and taking care of themselves. And like you said, then they end up sicker for longer.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else with regards to things to not do or difficulties or barriers that you've come across in your own work, but also in talking with other teleworkers?
I think those are the biggest things, right? Like it's that pressure of trying to take care of a house and take care of your work and trying to make sure that there's a balance, right? We talk so much about balance. It's not only working or only taking care of your house. Like you're doing both of those all the time. And just because you are working in your home does not mean that that is your own space. Like I know for me, like my office is my office, but I try to not, if I need to do something on the computer on a day that's not a work day, I'm going to use my husband's computer. Like, because I want that separation and I know me. And if I am on my computer, the temptation to log in or do this is there. And I have to create that separation for myself. And so I think that those are the biggest pieces. I know like the other barriers, like seeing clients for 8 hours in person and seeing clients for 8 hours virtually is very different, and the wear on you is different. And I think that I've had to reorganize my schedule a bit also. So I think that that's something that I learned along the way. But you don't, just because you don't have that commute time, you don't want to overbook yourself. And I think that that's something that's transferable to a bunch of fields because if you don't have an hour of a commute during the day, it's, oh, well, can I work a little longer? Or that temptation to eat through lunch at your desk. Like you have that's much more likely when you're looking of, okay, can I just get off a little early? Oh, can I do this? Or, oh, I really need to knock this out. So I'll just eat at my lunch. Like you're very good about in the office, like pushing for people to eat in the conference room or eat with their peers or take that break. But there's so much more intrinsic conversations that you have to have when it's just you. And so that was another kind of difficulty that I learned as I realized that I was sitting at my desk every day and not taking that break.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the idea of eating at your desk because you might recall this time last year, I had made a commitment to myself that I was going to not eat at my desk every day. I have a very bad habit of doing that. I'm doing some non-work stuff, but I'm definitely sitting at my desk. And, after, losing my father and not really feeling social when I first came back in January, I spent a lot of months still sitting at my desk. But recently, over the last several months, I sit on the floor in my office,
Mhm.
still kind of having some one-on-one time with myself, but I'm rewatching Grey's Anatomy. So,
Yeah.
I'm taking 30 minutes to decompress. And I think that folks who are teleworking might consider
Mhm.
if you're working at a desk all day, maybe you go to the couch or the porch or the back deck or go somewhere else for that 30-ish minutes of a lunch break and just have a change of scenery for sure. Um, so we're definitely getting into some of the do's
Yes.
of telework. And I would invite our listeners to take a listen to the next episode because Anastasia and I are going to talk about the must-dos after having talked about the barriers and the difficulties. And we're going to talk a little bit about some work from home boundaries and some tricks and some tips. So I encourage you to stick around and take a listen to that next one. Should be airing in just a couple days, and we will be back.